Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/Malicious Compliance. In today's episode, not 5 minutes early, but 10 minutes late, and it cost them a fortune. You know your rights? Okay. Go for it. No, you don't understand. I really wouldn't do that, if I were you. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Not 5 minutes early, but 10 minutes late, and it cost them a fortune. The 5-minute early post reminded me of a story that happened to a friend of mine. Let's call him Bobby. Bobby was a CNC machinist, a good one, and the only one. The company he worked for made an intricate product, and his CNC part was crucial. The rest of the product bolted onto it. The finished product sold for tens of thousands of dollars. It took 3 hours to make this piece. Bobby would make 3 a day. He'd make one in the morning, take his coffee break, then make another, and take his lunch break. That ate up about 6.75 hours. He'd stay late to make the third part, and make 2 hours OT. His new foreman turned out to be more than a bit of a jerk. He'd try to get Bobby to do other tasks, and Bobby said no, as he needed to monitor the CNC machine during all stages of the cycle. Foreman B** shed to the plant manager, who told him to back off and leave Bobby alone. One day there was a bad snowstorm, and Bobby was 10 minutes late. The foreman was there to greet him at the time clock, with a shit-eating grin on his face, holding a demerit slip. Bobby had clocked in a minute late the previous week, and the union rules said that if you were late twice within 14 days you got 20 demerit points. Bobby and foreman got into a bit of an animated conversation, and the union steward came over and said that Bobby had no choice but to take the demerit hit. So Bobby went to work. His shift was 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., but he usually stayed until 6:30 to finish the last part. Not today. At 4:30 he shut the machine down and headed for the door. The next morning, foreman comes over and says that the assembly team is short a part. Yeah, I know. I'm working on it right now. It'll be done in 2 hours. But they need 3 a day. Why didn't you make 3 of them yesterday? Because my shift is over at 4:30, and I went home. What? You stay every night until the third part is finished. Bobby pulled the demerit slip out of his shirt pocket, looked foreman in the eye, and said, "Not anymore." Bobby had done the math. Every week, instead of getting 15 parts, they were getting 10 or 11. Foreman tried to sweep it under the rug, but within a few days chaos ensued. The assemblers had no core part, and their team went to the plant manager to let him know that production was falling. The assemblers liked it. They got to hang around yakking while they waited for the next CNC part to arrive. Eventually, there was a meeting with plant manager, foreman, union steward, and Bobby. Foreman tried to throw Bobby under the bus, saying that he refused overtime. Union steward pointed out that, as per the contract, mandatory overtime was only in case of emergencies, and this wasn't an emergency. Bobby had every right to decline the OT. Foreman lost his temper, started yelling at Bobby and union steward, and was asked to leave the meeting. Plant manager knew he was screwed, and looked at Bobby and asked, "What's it going to take to get you to work the overtime?" Bobby smiled and replied, "As long as foreman is my supervisor, I won't be working a minute of OT." And that was the last anyone saw foreman. By sticking to the contract, Bobby cost the company a handful of parts worth many thousands of dollars, and put the company into a position where their lowered production would cost them even more, in perpetuity. Bobby worked a couple of Saturdays to catch up, and made double time for those shifts. They hired a new foreman, who was explicitly instructed, "Do not, under any circumstances, mess with Bobby." You know your rights? Okay. Go for it. I've told this story a few times elsewhere, but always get comments about posting here. Background: My ex and I were 3 months into separation, as I kept suggesting divorce agreements, trying to find what she would accept other than take her back and return to bring a doormat for her. I have a good head for legal documents, and understood very early that as much as I would prefer to just burn everything down and disappear, legally it was very likely I was going to be paying alimony, and she was entitled to a fair share of everything. But in a no-fault state with no gender preferences, it did mean a fair share. It was clear that legally I would not get an approval for an agreement heavily biased in her favor. So I kept reworking and sending possible divisions every few days for months. She would object to anything that put any responsibility on her, anything that left something of value out of her hands. Anytime I asked her what terms she would be okay with, she would just derail the conversation to something else. Not long into this, I realized that I would need a paper trail, so everything went to email only. Through all of this, I had recognized too that a court would order spousal support, so there wasn't any point in just cutting her off financially. Not a total doormat at this point though. I had moved my direct deposit to a solo account and kept up her weekly cash flow, and kept paying the bills. But my final offer in this period was the heavily unbalanced offer of splitting the cars one to each, me taking all the debt including her student loans, paying her $3,000 to $4,000 a month for a year so she could get her feet under her, and she gets all the stuff. I walk away with my car, my dogs, some tools, and some clothes. No go. Not good enough for her. And so we get to the meat of the story for the MC. 3 months in, I finally get her to agree to a mediator, since I'm getting nowhere. She shows up to the initial meeting, the first time we have seen each other in a while, the second time since splitting. She was staying with her sister. The mediator starts out with the rules of mediation and the agreements to sign. I sign easily, she balks, but signs it finally. One of the relevant terms is that we agree to not file any other legal paperwork. We would come to an agreement and the mediator would file the final court papers on both of our behalf to get the divorce ordered. The mediator starts asking basic questions. And every question, to either of us, results in my ex launching into an irrelevant topic attempting emotional manipulation of me or him. I quickly resolve to gray rock her directly, and only direct my interactions to the mediator. I do my best to ignore her off-topic ramblings, and reply to the mediator when she briefly crossed relevancy like someone falling from a tree and briefly being stopped by various branches on the way down. The peak was when she literally crawled on top of the big table to stick her face in mine to force me to see her and engage in her ranting. The mediator called it quits at that point. He reminded her of the rules she agreed to, gave us homework to fill out, and had us schedule the next meeting with his clerk, 2 weeks out. 3 days later, I get served with a summons to court for a hearing over spousal support. The summons shows the claim my ex made that all I had received from her in 3 months was $130. Oh boy. Not true at all. Not to mention in violation of the mediator terms. I end up on a conference call with the ex and the mediator as he tells her that she needs to withdraw the complaint or mediation can't continue. She adamantly insists that she knows her rights. So the mediator ends his involvement, cuts us refund checks minus time worked so far, and exits stage left. I prepare for the hearing. I print out 3 months of bank statements and highlight every transfer to her. Every bill paid on her behalf. Every ATM withdraw by her card. Over 100 toll bills I received from her just driving through express lane tolls, so I got the elevated license plate fee mailed to me. $13,000 in change. You missed a couple zeros in your complaint, I thought. My final stack of paper was rather thick. So I made and printed an Excel spreadsheet summary for the cover sheet. I also looked up the spousal support rules again. It is 40% of the difference between the income goes from the higher paid to the lower paid. Some little wiggle room, but that's it. Simple. She was currently getting up to 72% of my pay once you factored her bills in. This court hearing was a good thing. Not as good as a mediator and fast resolution, but I wasn't likely to end up screwed more here. Not to mention, I had some daydreams of her finding out what lying on court documents might do. Court date rolls around. I show up to court, waiting in the hall outside the family law section. She shows up and plops herself next to me to start going off on me again. I try to ignore her. Then, to keep from engaging, I start a written transcript of her ranting using the back cover of my paperwork folder. Finally, she realized what I'm doing and ends the ranting with, "Oh, I guess you are writing what I'm saying so you can make your friends hate me." They needed no encouragement. She huffs a few seats away and is quiet the rest of the time we waited. The court officer, not a judge, just someone authorized to handle it since it is a simple and clear legal process, finally comes to get us, and we head in. The officer starts the legal speeches, yada yada, then asks my ex if she has anything to add to the complaint. She launches into a roller coaster speech proclaiming all my bad faults, some of which were real, how mean I was to try to divorce her, and how I obviously didn't need any of the money I made because he is just going to live somewhere simple and cheap anyway. Yeah, her words. The court officer returns to the present like someone climbing down from the kitchen table after seeing a rat run by. And she asks me if I have anything I'd like to say. She can see the stack of paper, and eyeballs it as she is talking. I hand over the stack, tell the officer that the summary sheet on top should help clear up the financial points in question, and just verbally start going through the items. At each one, my ex interrupts to give a reason why that item shouldn't count. Every single one. The officer keeps asking her to stop interrupting, but to no avail. We finally finish the list. The officer is shaking her head slightly and says, "Mr. Yen, this court process is to ensure that both parties are doing the right thing. So all of the gestures to encompass the stack of paper needs to stop right now. We will garnish your paychecks for the amount specified by law and send that to her instead." I know it's a win. I knew it was going to be. She didn't. She sat there all smug as we get into the calculations. I asked for a couple of adjustments to keep the amount of her car payment since I co-signed and I wanted to be sure the bill was paid. I expected that she would refuse or overspend on other stuff and be unable to pay it. I didn't want to give her the power to trash my credit. The officer agreed. I then asked to keep the insurance payment amount too, for much the same reason. Also agreed by the officer. My ex continued to be smug. I know she was thrilled at the idea of getting a court check directly. It sure would show me. Everything wrapped up, we got the totals, signed papers, I handed over a check for the first payment, and the officer got up to make copies of everything. I asked the officer if I could wait in another room while she did, and got an agreement with a bit of side-eye at my ex. I got my paperwork first, with the officer saying, "It might take a few minutes for her to get her paperwork, but you are free to go." I got the hint and left immediately. I had parked a few streets away anyway, another barrier if she couldn't park near me. I got in my car and immediately called my cell carrier and canceled her phone. Does she want to set up her own plan? I can't answer that. I am obeying a court order to remove her from my accounts, okay? And work down the remaining subscriptions I was paying for that she used. I even had the bills in front of me from court with account numbers and customer service numbers right there. I was done and driving home when she started blowing up my phone with incoming emails demanding to know what I was doing. Then texts from her sister's phone. Then calls. I just grinned and didn't answer any of them. She stopped after an hour or so and gave me a few hours of silence. Then an all-caps email with a screenshot of the Netflix inactive account message, OMG. Even Netflix. I admit I giggled. The fallout wasn't over though. A month later, after she realized how much less she has from me after winning her case, she files an appeal. It is denied due to lack of reason. A month later, she files a complaint that I wasn't paying her car payment. Just an excuse to get into court. I had been paying it, and I was also pretty confident that even if I hadn't, she didn't know how to get into that loans account. She legally could, just never had cared to learn how. I had a lawyer at this point, and we both go to court. She is going to join by phone. The officer paused before calling and tells my lawyer, "This lady is a piece of work." The validation of that statement will always remain with me. The call goes predictably. My ex makes irrelevant rants. The officer keeps shutting her down. Finally asks my ex for proof that I wasn't paying the car payment, as she is holding statements and check images proving I had. My ex nearly screams, "I just know he isn't so he can hurt me." The officer replies, "I am holding proof that he has paid it and is satisfying his legal obligation." The complaint is dismissed. Thank you. And hangs up on my ex. Divorce took another 10 months, lots more crazy, teaches her newbie lawyer a hard lesson, and I walked away with even less alimony than the spousal support, and only about 60% of the debt. I lost my dogs to her though, my only regret in the outcome. One is certainly past old age limits now, the other is in that range. I still miss them. No, you don't understand. I really wouldn't do that, if I were you. As I talked about the last time I posted in here, I work in a union shop, and I've been a shop steward for most of my 25+ year career. In that time, I've seen some shit, both figurative and literal, and every single time I've ever been unwary enough about how fate works to utter the words, "Now I've seen everything," the universe will inevitably hand me its beer and say, "Watch this." Stewards, despite the general perception of us, aren't there to defend employees who are accused of misconduct. We're there to defend the collective bargaining agreement, meaning if you've well and truly ruined yourself and your future with the agency we both work for, my role is primarily helping you determine which of your options for leaving you're going to exercise. I've been at this rodeo for a long time, and management and I generally have a pretty good understanding of how things are going to go. Enter Jackie. Jackie was one of those unbelievably toxic peaked-in high school cheerleader types, with just enough understanding of what our employer does, how it's required to behave within federal guidelines, and what its obligations are when you utter certain mystical phrases like "I need an accommodation," or discrimination based on a protected class. To be clear, those things are not just law, they're also morally right to be concerned about, and so my employer actually bends over backwards and does backflips to be certain that they're going above and beyond the minimum. Jackie was not a minority in any sense, she was female, but in a workplace that's 80% female, that doesn't quite count. She may well have been disabled, but that was undiagnosed, I think, and I'm inclined to think her claims of it, much like most of the rest of the things she said, were complete fabrications. The point at which I got involved was at the tail end of over a year's worth of actions by Jackie, in which it rapidly became apparent that her manager was, in fact, an excellent candidate for canonization. I got referred to her when one of my other union friends contacted me and said, "Hey, Jackie so-and-so just got put on administrative leave, and it's total BS, can you help?" I get referrals like this a lot, both because I've been around forever, and because I have a pretty good track record for ensuring that people accused of sh*t they haven't actually done get treated fairly, so nothing stuck out to me as odd. I contacted her, and she had absolutely no idea why management would put her on admin leave, without any warning, and confiscate all of her agency-issued devices, access, and instruct her that she was not to have any contact at all with anyone she worked with during work hours. This immediately sent up a whole host of red flags. For one thing, I know the senior HR guy that is the HR analyst's boss who's involved, having been down the road of difficult situation, but this is what we can do negotiation with him many times over the years. I don't always agree with him, but he's fair, and usually we can come to some sort of middle ground. At any rate, he would never suspend someone out of the blue without a really good reason. She knows what she's done. She has to, so I gave her my usual spiel of things to do and things you should not do. Don't tell me, or our employer, things that aren't true. Especially if you think it'll make you look bad if you don't. Don't talk to your coworkers. Don't talk to your friends about this, particularly because you live in a town of under 2,000 people. Everyone knows everything about everyone else. Do not talk with management or HR without me present. Period. When they do start asking questions, keep answers simple, to the point, short, and do not give lengthy explanations. Tell them what they want to know and otherwise shut up. I have been here and done this many times. I know this process very well. I can't tell you what they're going to do, but I can tell you what I think they're going to do, and I'm usually either right or pretty close to being right. I have been surprised. Nearly 3 weeks went by of radio silence from the agency, other than a bland sort of "we want to talk with Jackie about utilization of work assignments, tasks and equipment" email that tells you almost nothing while still being literally true. Finally, it was go time for a meeting, and I did something I haven't done in a really long time. I physically drove to Jackie's worksite instead of attending virtually, over an hour and a half each way. What the hell, the weather was nice. We met ahead of going in, and I asked her if she remembered the rules I gave her at the beginning. She said she did. I asked her if she'd been following them, and she said she'd been very careful to. Swell. In we go. During the meeting, it was almost immediately obvious to me from the questions they started asking that Jackie was in serious shit. Not, like, written warning, or pay reduction. No, they were going to go for termination, and she was probably going to be very lucky if they decided not to refer it to the DA for criminal prosecution. An abbreviated summary of just the high points. Jackie had hundreds of confidential documents and electronic files in her personal possession, many of which fall squarely under HIPAA. She had emailed these out of the government system to one of the 4 or 5 personal email addresses she maintains. Her explanation for this was questionable. Jackie had logged overtime without permission. A lot. And, on one memorable date, when she was vacationing in Europe with her family at the time, she said she'd called in to attend a meeting, but didn't have an answer why that meeting had apparently been 11.5 hours long and nobody remembered her attending by phone. Jackie had audio recordings of disabled and elderly people with whom she was working, that she had taken without their consent or knowledge. A lot of them. Jackie's overall work product and system activity reliably showed that she was logging in at the start of her day, from home, and she worked some in the afternoon, but there were hours and hours of time when her computer was idle. She explained this as participating in union activity, which I knew was BS, because Jackie is not a steward. Jackie has no idea what the collective bargaining agreement actually says about much of anything beyond stewards can do whatever they want, and management can't say shit, which is uninformed, shall we say. At any rate, steward activity must be recorded and time-coded as such. Jackie has never attended steward training and so didn't know this. Apparently nobody ever told her that. There's more. There's so much more, but in the interests of brevity, I will summarize the next 4 months of my dealing with this woman by pointing back to the cardinal rules I gave her, and simply say, she broke every single one of them. A lot. When it finally got to the dismissal hearing that comes before the "you're fired" GTFO letter, she told me going in that she wanted to run things, because she had some stuff she wanted to cover that she thought I probably wouldn't be comfortable doing. True, because it was irrelevant. B, didn't know much about. Again, true, because she'd invented details, story, and witnesses as participants. And C, she felt like I wasn't really on her side in this to begin with. Not quite true, she was a member, so my job is representation here. Me, I really don't think that's a good idea. I've done a lot of these, you should let me handle it. Jackie, no. I know what I'm doing, and I talked with my attorney about this a lot. You can't stop me. Me, you're right. I can't. But this isn't going to go the way you think it will. Jackie, I know I'm right. They can't do this to me. Me, this isn't a good idea, but okay. It's your show. In we went, and sat down. The senior HR guy I mentioned earlier was there, and he gave me a funny look when I sat back, laptop closed, and said nothing. Dismissal meetings are actually our meeting, and we get to run them from start to finish. They're there to listen. She started talking, and I have to give them credit, they took notes, listened to the things she said, and kept straight faces the entire time. It went exactly as I figured it would. Just the things they'd asked her about in the first of the several meetings I attended with Jackie had covered terminable offenses on at least 4 or 5 different subjects, independent of one another. At the end, when she finally wound down, they all turned to me, Jackie included, and asked if I had anything I wanted to cover or that I thought may have been missed. Nope, I said. I think she covered everything already. I don't have anything to add. That afternoon, I got the union copy of her dismissal notice. Generally, they are open to at least discussing the option of the worker resigning and giving them a neutral reference going forward, but that wasn't in the cards. The last I had heard of Jackie, the Department of Justice was involved with her and her husband, and I'm reasonably confident that it didn't go well for her either. I do know that she will never work for the government again, as the letter was pretty explicit about what information they would release to any government agency asking for a reference. So it goes, they followed the collective bargaining agreement, terminating her with ample just cause. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.